Namaste. We have exciting news for our friends in USA. Jayaji will be visiting the US in April for talks in Washington DC, Virginia, Maryland, Atlanta, Dallas, Houston, the Bay Area, New York and New Jersey. Spread the word and invite your loved ones in the US. If you'd like to organize a talk by Jayaji in the US, message us on WhatsApp at +91 98202 32939. More details are in the description box. I now request Jayaji to continue with chapter 2.
ॐ सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः
Uh, yes. So from the 8th of February till the 11th, we're having a series of lectures in Bangalore, Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan, on the science of success, which is the third chapter of the Gita. And those of you who know people in Bangalore, please make that effort to pass the word on to them, because however much we try, what you can do, we can't do. However much money we spend in publicity, a small message from you or a call from you saying that you've benefited and they will also, if they attend, goes a long way. So please do that. I'm sure all of you know at least one person in Bangalore. And of course, those in Bangalore should make that effort and come to Bharati Vidya Bhavan. Any questions? Yes.
I wanted to know about what is Nirandar Chintan. What is Ananya Chintan? Like, how can we go to that step of Ananya Chintan?
Okay. This concept of Ananya Chintan is, the phrase is directly from the Bhagavad Gita. So the Gita says that Ananyas Chintayanto Mam Ye Jana Paryupasate, means those people who do Ananya Chintan on me means on Atman. To them I will bestow whatever. So what is this Ananya Chintan? Anya means other. Ananya means no other. Chintan, thinking, reflection. Now today what are we thinking of? World, material things. So what is the problem with that? Because the world is constantly changing, and even if you get a perfect fit between your desire or your mindset and the world, it will only last for a while. Before you know it, it changes. Either the world changes or your mind changes. So you're on slippery ground there. Instead, what he says is, shift your mind and reflect on the spirit in you, Atman, which is permanent. It will remain with you even after death. It will remain with you through all the changes that you go through. So then immediately there is some stability to you. But the problem is you can't. You can't think. Why can't you think of Atman? Correct, your mind is attracted towards the world because of the desires that you already have. So that's why what they recommend is that you fix a slightly higher goal. Just as in a company, what does a company do? This year's turnover, this year's sales was so much. So we'll take, let's say, 20% increase or 15% increase or whatever it is. Now, the fixation of the goal should be such that it is achievable but with effort. If it is way beyond your capability, what will happen? You won't even try, which is what is happening now. Now we are taking this verse literally and saying, okay, Ananya Chintan on Atman God. We can't. So we say, come back to where you are. So there is no progress, there is no development. That is why they say, fix a goal that is achievable. Like say, find out what is it that you're working for right now. Most of us are working for self and family. We're not totally selfish, that we don't consider even the family members. From there, you shift one step, maybe the larger family, maybe the community, maybe your colleagues at work, maybe your team, maybe the society that you work in, that you live in, and slowly build yourself up. Then what happens is, let's say you are focusing on your community. Then you say, why only my community? There are people outside the community also that I can include. So that's how you go higher and higher till the highest is Atman. Okay? Now, why do they say Ananya Chintan? Because the law is, as you think, so you become. And that thinking can't be once a day, once a week, once in 3 months, or whenever you need God's help, you think of God. Can't be like that. It has to be constant with no other thinking, which is what is happening in the world. You see, a businessman is constantly thinking of what? Money, correct. And that focus is so frightening that he doesn't care about anything else. Whatever he does, if he goes to a music concert, it will be because that will improve his profits. If he goes to a party, it's because he will meet someone who will add to his business interests. So he's totally focused there. A sports person is thinking, dreaming of only that Olympic gold. Or a cricketer is only thinking of the World Cup, or I don't know, whatever. So that thinking must be constant. And the fact is that whatever you think of constantly, you become that. That is what we've become. We've become finite, limited individuals when we are that mighty self. Okay? Wait. What is the complete? Ekeha Kuru Nandana. So it's talking about Vyavasayatmika means many branched. It's the same concept. If your mind is going all over the place, then you're not steady. So you lose a lot of energy, dynamism in all these frivolous thoughts. So that must be made single pointed. When your thoughts are made single pointed, you achieve success in whatever it is that you are seeking, whether material or spiritual. You had a question? Take.
The mind gives into temptation and the role of the intellect, so we should strengthen the intellect enough so that it controls the mind. So temptations would not have been there, it would have been a easier and nicer path for humans. So why were temptations created?
Temptations were not created. You have a desire, you have a weakness, so it appears as temptation. You see, it's like this. You have a desire for iPhone 16. Your grandfather doesn't have a desire for it. So that object is tempting for you, not for your grandfather. He can happily meet with any number of iPhones, nothing will happen to him. His internal needle will remain steady. So, you're asking why were the temptations created? You should ask yourself, why do I desire the iPhone? Right? It's a wrong question. And we tend to believe that it is the world that is tempting. It's not. It depends on you. And what tempts you also differs from person to person. So you have to manage yourself, your desires. You have to give your personality a direction. And then it's fine. Nothing in the world will tempt you. Any other question? Okay, so we had completed verse 58 last time. We'll move on to 59.
विषया विनिवर्तन्ते निराहारस्य देहिनः रसवर्जं रसोऽप्यस्य परं दृष्ट्वा निवर्तते.
When one abstains, sense objects recede, but the fondness remains. The fondness goes only on seeing the Supreme. This is answering your question directly, this verse. So, you remember verse 58 spoke of the tortoise, and it gave a very, very important tip to us that when you don't need to be afraid of the world. You're a human being of outstanding caliber. So don't be afraid and withdraw from the world. But while you are interacting confidently with the world, there may be one particular instance where you sense a weakness. It's as if you have a particular fondness for something and you detect that, oh, I'm going to be trapped in this. Then what must you do? Withdraw. Like a tortoise withdraws its limbs from all sides. So when the tortoise withdraws its limbs, it becomes almost invincible because you can do what you like with the tortoise, it will not get hurt. So he says the limbs are the five senses and the mind. The five senses and the mind should move around contacting the world freely. Enjoy the world. But when you sense temptation, withdraw under the safe cover of the intellect. Then nothing will happen to you. But this is what we don't do because we are overconfident, because we don't understand the power of the senses. And so, what do? We get trapped. And then it's too late. So, the intellect must always be in communion with God, with the higher. So now he's saying that when you abstain, sense objects recede. This is another truth of life. Because often we say, like particularly diabetic patients, there's a doctor who told me, he says, I get very disappointed. I should be getting depressed because my patients always have a justification for something. So let's say when the mango season approaches, the patient will go to the doctor and say, Doctor, now the mango season is approaching. How can I not eat mangoes? So she eats mangoes and her sugar levels go sky high. After that, she will say, but something else has happened. My nephew is getting married. Now, when I go to the wedding, how can I not eat sweets? Then she'll say, it's my husband's birthday, so I have to eat the cake. And she goes on like this. Then she'll say, Navratri is coming, and Dasra is coming, and Diwali is coming. The whole year goes. So, but at any time, you make a decision and say, I will not do this, whatever it is. I will not drink, let's say. Then what happens? The bottles leave your home. It's as if they have a mind of their own. Where do they go? To your brother-in-law's place where there is more demand. So, there is a demand and supply principle that works. Sense objects go wherever there is a demand. If you have the demand, somehow or the other, the object will come to you. That's what happened during COVID. No alcohol was available anywhere, but a seasoned drinker had constant supply. Where he got it from, I don't know. That's what happens. So it's a useful tip for us. If you want to control, keep the object away. Let's say you have decided to lose weight or your sugar level has gone up and you say no sweets. You can't control while you have chocolates, mithai, stuff lying around in the house. It's very difficult to control, especially when you have a weakness for it. So what must you do? Remove, donate it, give it away, make sure it doesn't enter your home. So it's easy. Then, but the fondness remains because you have a basic desire. And that's why you have to be alert, like alcoholics. Even after they stop drinking, they say, I am an alcoholic. They are not allowed to have even cough syrup which has alcohol in it. Because they may fall anytime. So this you must understand. However much you control, as long as you have a desire, that basic root, fondness remains. That will go only on realization. And he puts it very nicely by saying, on seeing the Supreme. So, satsang,
It's applicable only for the sense objects, but it's applicable for the attachments to the mind also.
it is across the board. But here he is talking only about sense objects. It includes attachment of the mind to people. You are physically away from the person. Like in English, you say out of sight, out of mind. That little distance comes. So it's difficult to remain detached when you're in constant touch with a person. So, satsang is important. What do you keep company with? And again, it's not just objects. It is objects, it is action, it is emotion, thought. And satsang is not just going to a guru and wasting his time and yours. It is company of good thoughts. So if your mind is elevated, is in constant touch with higher thoughts, then you will not fall for temptation. Because it's a question of higher and lower. Also, what happens is vasanas, which are unmanifest desire. And as long as it remains as vasana, it doesn't bother you. You may not even be aware of it. But the problem arises when the environment is conducive for that particular vasana, it pops up. That is why sometimes you are taken by surprise because you never thought you had a desire for this particular thing. So it's important to keep your thoughts bathed in the higher so that your negative vasanas or lower vasanas never get a chance to come up. And then eventually they get stifled. But now what we are doing is the environment as agog with objects, with people, with all kinds of temptations. And so even if you have a little bit of a vasana for it, it comes up. That's why satsang is important. So the first step is put the intellect in place. Just analyze. Is this desire something that I should be encouraging? Is it in my interest? Is it a positive thing for me? See, it's not necessarily taboo for everyone. Like there was a lady who went and told her husband, let's buy a Mercedes. So he said, fine, we'll buy, but we'll have to sell the house we're living in to buy the car, and then we can sleep on the street. So it's like that. Your first question should be, can I afford it? Second question should be, is it in line with my life's mission? Third is, do I really need it? Some basic questions like this you ask yourself. And if the answer is yes, by all means go and buy it. And if the answer is no, then don't buy it. Also, it depends on your mindset. This morning, there was a class and a gentleman told me that his friend bought some high-end car, a Rolls Royce or something. And he doesn't take that car out of the compound where he lives. You know why? He's afraid it will get scratched, a dent will happen, this, that and the other. And what is he driving around in? In an ordinary car. Then what is the point of buying this expensive car? So there are people who may have the resources, who can buy, but they don't have the mindset to enjoy it. You know what mindset you need? Detachment. You need to understand at the end of the day, it's only a car. And I live in a city where every car has either a scratch or a dent or something. You can't help it because cars are driving centimeters apart from each other. Or while parking, it happens. And when it happens, after you buy a car, new car, if it happens, you must celebrate. Arey, inauguration ho gaya. Like the way you break a coconut, put a garland, like that the scratch has come. If you don't have that element of detachment from the car, then you might as well roam around in an auto or auto rickshaw. That is the best. Why do you bother with buying expensive cars? So that is the thing. You must have the capacity to enjoy. Most of us don't have. Next verse, 60.
यततो ह्यपि कौन्तेय पुरुषस्य विपश्चितः इन्द्रियाणि प्रमाथीनि हरन्ति प्रसभं मनः.
The stormy senses violently drag the mind of even a constantly striving wise person. Yatataha vipaschit purushaha. What a fine, what a wonderful way of presenting it. Constantly striving wise person. O Kaunteya, son of Kunti. So very affectionately, Krishna addresses Arjuna as Kaunteya, son of Kunti, means you're like a brother to me. And when knowledge is transacted in an environment of affection, of camaraderie, of friendship, then it goes straight through like a bullet because there's no resistance. So what is he saying? He says, in short, he's saying, don't take the senses lightly because they are very powerful. And this is the beginning of the sequence of thought, which we'll explain in a bit. So, if the stormy senses, look at the words he's using, violently drag the mind, of whom? Not you and me. A constantly striving wise person, then where is the chance for you and me? And you have the gall to say, I can control it, take New Year resolutions left, right, and center. It's not easy. How many of us can honestly say that you get up from a meal, you stop eating exactly where you wanted to stop? How many of us can say that? Because somewhere you eat more, drink more, something. Now, if you can't control your appetite, a simple thing like food, where are you going to control the mind when it comes to subtler things? You must understand. See, you must understand the strength of the enemy. If you want to control something, you must understand how strong it is. You can't take it lightly. And you must understand your weakness. Your intellect is not in place. You're not wise. You're not striving. And you're certainly not constantly striving. So, it's out of the picture. So, to make us understand that, a Sapta Rishi like Vishwamitra sacrificed his reputation and gave us a story. So, the story is, I'm sure all of you know it, that when Vishwamitra was deep in meditation, Menaka, heavenly damsel, appeared before him and started dancing. And next thing you know, Vishwamitra has fallen for her. And then they have a daughter also. So, now just think, Vishwamitra is one of the Sapta Rishis. Even an ordinary person can withstand a lady dancing. Huh? And Vishwamitra, you think, can't? But why was this story given to us? To make us understand the power of the senses. It is not easy at all. And you must observe the mind, where it goes, where it escapes, how it justifies certain things. And you've got to pull it back at the beginning itself, otherwise you're gone. First thought you must, because it's like, have you seen a ball falling at the top of a staircase? So first bounce, it goes to the third step. Second bounce, seventh step. After that, out of control. Even the most athletic person cannot catch it. I mean, most of us can't catch even at the first bounce. But a really athletic young person, maybe second bounce, third bounce, after that is gone. So the mind is like that. If you don't control at the very first thought, then it starts, it gathers momentum. Then it's impossible. And so we have instances like the King of England gave up his throne. Can you imagine the King of England is not what England is now. At that time, they ruled the whole world. They used to say, the sun never sets on the British Empire. At that time, the king gave up the kingdom because he wanted to marry a divorcee, Mrs. Simpson. And according to the rules of royalty, that was not allowed. How did he fall? And I'm sure later he must have regretted it. So that's the thing. And why? How can you be alert enough to stop it at the first thought? Arrest it at the first thought is when you have a strong intellect and alert intellect. How do you get that? Study the Bhagavad Gita every day. Every day you must have some exposure to the higher. Even if you wake up late, even there are times when you have a late night, whatever, at least cheat and have that little exposure while you're just before breakfast or something. Because if you don't have this, you fall for something or the other. Some addiction you pick up. What is addiction? The mind goes towards something. So this addiction is not necessarily alcohol or cigarettes or drugs. That is extreme. But simple things. A simple thing like you get used to having a dessert after every meal. Not that it's bad, or if you're not diabetic, you can. But there are certain habits, certain attachments that creep in.
There are certain vasanas that we have that just manifest. So, if you're not aware, then they are just manifesting. So, we have to be aware all the time.
Yes. No, what is the question? I don't understand.
No, the mere strength of the vasana is such that it just manifests.
Correct.
So, you have to have control all the time.
No, see, if the vasana is so strong that it has its way, you may not be able to control it, but at least you must be aware. Like, you get angry, you start snapping at people. That vasana is so strong that it is coming up all the time. But you must be aware that this is what is happening. Most of us are not aware. So the most angry person believes he is very gentle. So awareness, and then you stop it just at the point when you're about to explode. Once you're aware, then you must analyze and say, why do I get angry? See, the basic thing is when you get angry, you are paying the price for somebody else's fault. Because you believe somebody else is wrong, right? And that's the most stupid thing you can do. Let the other person pay the price. Why are you paying the price? And then you're ruining your whole life because you're alienating yourself from people with just momentary irritations and explosions. And then you're setting yourself up for a very lonely life because you can't get along with anybody. And all the time you're blaming somebody else. That's the problem with anger. How does anger come? You have to address the root. Too many desires unfulfilled. So you have to find out what these desires are. How do I manage them? How do I rise above them? So the moment you turn inward, you stop getting irritated. And even if you think you're justified in it, like let's say you want cleanliness around, and someone who you have to work for you is unclean, is not even aware. So what are the options you have? First thing is, you can't be getting angry because that person doesn't even understand. So then you have to figure out, either I do it myself or I get someone else to do it in the way that I want. Or just accept that it will not be according to what I want. And you move ahead. But to remain there and keep getting irritated is not an option.
After aware, the next step will be to pause and analyze.
Yes. and find a solution. So, we have seen that verse 54 was Arjuna's question. Krishna answers from verses 55 to 59. In verse 60, he says, the senses violently drag the mind of even a constantly striving wise person. Now, this is like a tug of war. In a tug of war, there is one guy in front, there are two teams, and second, third, and the last one is the main person. So they keep dragging. One person goes to the other side, then comes the next. So this verse 61 should say that mind has gone, now what is next? Intellect. But he doesn't. Verses 61 to 66, he goes off at a tangent, as it were, to explain the importance of the intellect. Then 67, he connects with verse 60 and says that mind, that the senses which drag the mind away, now drag the intellect away. Now drags the intellect away. Okay? So he connects. And then he has already said in between, buddhi nashat pranashyati, means without buddhi you're gone, you're destroyed. Now, the importance of the intellect we just don't understand. Some people don't even know that we have two instruments called the mind and intellect. They use it collectively as mind. And then they talk about sense control, you must control yourself, you must have discipline. But what exactly is it? Nobody knows, they just talk. Even those of us who know the intellect, this much we know, right? But we don't know the importance of it. In other words, in our life, from the time you started studying the Bhagavad Gita up to now, can you say that your intellect has improved? Some say yes, some say no, most are keeping quiet. This is it. And all right, you know the importance of can you say that you're using the intellect 100% of the time? Correct. So, in Viveka Chudamani, Shankaracharya gives the example of 5 creatures, each of whom has a weakness for one sense and gets destroyed. The moth has a weakness for the eye. So it's attracted by the fire, it goes around the fire, it's consumed by the fire, dies. The deer has a weakness for sound. So you know how they catch deer? They beat the drums and the deer come out of the forest, and that's how they get caught. Then comes the bee, has a weakness for smell. Enters a flower, the flower closes in on it and destroys it. Then fish, like all of us, weakness for the tongue. Keeps biting the bait, bites the bait and gets caught. And the last is the elephant, skin. So the elephant can be captured only during the mating season. So it runs helter-skelter and falls into the pit and is captured. Now Shankaracharya says, these creatures have a weakness for only one sense organ and they get destroyed. What is the fate of a human being who has a weakness for all 5? And yet we are alive. How? How? Intellect. So at least to some extent we are using the intellect. That's how we are alive. But if you use the intellect properly, my God, you will be flying high. Just the intellect, nothing else. So your take home for today is just this. Use your existing intellect. Make a concerted effort to develop that intellect. How?
Why questioning?
Study the Bhagavad Gita. Okay, now how will you study the Bhagavad Gita every day? We have the videos, and any of you want it, we will give it to you at half the price. But you must take it. See, attending here once a week will not help you. Now, this doesn't mean don't come next week. But what I'm saying is, just once a week exposure is not enough. There must be that daily exposure. You know why? Because there is a gravitational pull towards the world. So the mind goes downward. Now to pull it up, every day if you don't have exposure, then you keep going downhill. Where you'll hit rock bottom, we don't know. So just to pull yourself up, and one inspiring thought is enough. Just one. You see a kind act somewhere, you hear something nice, you see a lovely movie or a video, it stays with you, doesn't it? That's why we say study the Bhagavad Gita. It's not a fanaticism. Anyway, it's up to you. 61.
तानि सर्वाणि संयम्य युक्तासीत मत्परः वशे हि यस्येन्द्रियाणि तस्य प्रज्ञा प्रतिष्ठिता.
Restraining them all, one should sit absorbed in me, the highest. One whose senses are under control is indeed a sthita prajna. Steadfast in wisdom means an enlightened soul. Huh? Now, he's talking about the state of self-realization. And what is he talking about here? What is he focusing on? Sense control. Without sense control, how can you reach those heights? So the Kathopanishad has portrayed it by way of a picture which is now associated with the Gita. What is that picture? Chariot. So there's a chariot with 5 horses. The charioteer is Krishna and the passenger sitting behind is Arjuna. So the metaphor is the 5 horses represent the 5 sense organs. The reins are the mind that connect each of the 5 sense organs with the intellect. The charioteer is the intellect. And the passenger is you, your whole personality. So you have a destination. You have a journey. You have some place to go to. Now, while going, just as in a chariot, if the charioteer is skilled, he holds the horses just right, not too loose, not too tight. All the 5 horses move in one direction and you reach your destination. But if the charioteer is either asleep, not alert, or not skilled enough, then what will happen? The reins are held loose, each horse goes in its own direction and the chariot crashes. Midway, you're gone. And this is what is happening to all of us. So the first step is to hold on. All our senses, our sensual urges, our mind's attachments are taking us, pulling us in different directions. So we crash. At least you must give everything one direction. So you must identify your strongest desire. What is it that I want most? What is it that I want to achieve before I die? You must think. What field do I want to engage myself in? Without thinking, you simply live. And then at least your life has a sense of direction. And then you get tempted. Now you see so many people. Bill Clinton was considered one of the best presidents the United States has had. But see what happened. What a pity. Sometimes you have great sports persons with immense talent suddenly go off at a tangent somewhere. So one little attachment, one little temptation is enough to destroy you. How do you hold yourself together? And the beauty of it is, the more successful you become, the richer you get, the more powerful you are, the more you achieve, more temptations come to you. So you're in the public eye, everyone wants you. Everyone is willing to do anything for you. At that time, to control is even more difficult. So that's why in the past they had sages, in-house sages, who advised the kings of that time to protect the king from the corrosive effects of wealth and power. Today there is no such thing. So the wealthiest of people, the most powerful people have no connection with spirituality. That's why whatever happens is happening. It's very sad. So if you don't do this, then it will be the horse's journey, not yours. The horses take you whichever way they want. Sorry? See, mistakes everybody makes. Okay, you must understand, yes, I've made a mistake, learn from it and move on. So in other words, use the intellect again to understand that this is what I've done. And how did I get into it? Because the intellect was not strong enough, was not alert, and the mind, the desire of the mind was too powerful. So I need to develop that intellect. You pull yourself together and move on. It's never the end of life. The biggest mistake you can make, you can still recover. Okay? You know, Roger Federer, when he addressed a university, he said that. He said, if you take even the top players, at best, only 15% of the shots are successful. Other 50% you have goofed up. Still you win somehow. So what must you do? Every point, before the point, you must view it as if it's the most important thing in life. But once it's behind you, dismiss it. Whether it's a failure or a win, both ways. Dismiss it, just move on to the next moment, next point. So, now we move to verses 62 and 63 that speak of the ladder of fall.
ध्यायतो विषयान् पुंसः सङ्गस्तेषूपजायते सङ्गात् सञ्जायते कामः कामात् क्रोधोऽभिजायते क्रोधात् भवति सम्मोहः सम्मोहात् स्मृतिविभ्रमः स्मृतिभ्रंशात् बुद्धिनाशः बुद्धिनाशात् प्रणश्यति.
Pondering over sense objects, one gets attached to them. Attachment breeds desire. From desire, anger is born. 63. Anger leads to delusion. From delusion, memory gets clouded. From clouding of memory, the intellect gets destroyed. And when the intellect goes, one is ruined. So, it's a stairway to destruction. And it starts with just a thought, one thought. It's like you go somewhere and see a luxury car. You say, nice car. What is wrong with that? Sometimes on Marine Drive, you see a beautiful car go by. And if you have interest in cars, you say, wow, nice car. That's not a criminal thought. But if you keep investing in it, that's what he says, keep thinking about it, you get attached to the concept of that car. Now, where are you? You are on a two-wheeler. And you see this luxury car. When you get attached to it, then you want it. So out of attachment is a thin stream of thoughts going from you to a particular object or being. You keep thinking, means the intellect is not available, not alert, you're not even aware. Then it forms a thick stream of thoughts which is called desire. So you want to obtain it and possess it. Now, if something comes in the way, like customs duty is too high, or something like that, then you get angry. It's like, sometimes a cricketer is gifted, earns a prize of a car, and then custom duty and all of that is slapped on him. He appeals to them, don't allow me. Now if they say no, if the authorities say no, he gets very angry with them. So anger is born from desire. Anger can never come unless there is an underlying desire. So as we said earlier, if you tend to get angry a lot, it means there is a lot of frustration in you, too many desires unfulfilled. So you become snappy, like a dog. Barks here, bark there, for no reason at all. And you must understand that I am getting snappy because I have too many desires. Now, it could be that the desire is positive, but you have no business you have no business deciding that somebody else should behave the way I want, right? So that frustration builds up when others don't meet up with your expectations. They will never meet with your expectations. Even if you get married to God himself, you will start complaining. So you must understand there's something amiss inside. Then if you allow anger to build up, then that leads to delusion. Means you forget who you are, you forget who you're talking to. All refinement and niceness goes out of the window. You become a crude person. And the worst is to put it down in writing. Your madness, if you say words, you might get away with it. The other person might forget. But you're putting it down in writing like an idiot. So there are people who send WhatsApp messages, ugly, nasty messages, or emails, one after the other. Means there's no redemption. I don't literally mean that, but it means you're fairly far gone. So that delusion comes. Then with the delusion comes memory loss. You forget your place in life. You forget to be respectful. You forget to be gracious. And the worst in you comes out. And then that results in complete loss of intellect. And there is destruction. So, what must you do? Arrest it right at the beginning. You know where a river starts and where it ends. Is you go to the source, Gangotri. How many of you have been there? I haven't been to Gangotri, but you know the place where Alaknanda and Bhagirathi and Alaknanda meet. It's such a beautiful spot. And that's where the Ganga starts. It is so, it's a small, it's not a stream, it's a river, but not that mighty Ganga that you see near the ocean. It go right to the source, it's just a trickle. It's a trickle here, trickle there. You can easily change the direction, you can do what you like with it. But once it's down in the plains, it's impossible. So, thoughts are like that. And because the intellect is not available, it is not strong enough, it's not aware, so you wait, meaning you have no choice, till it gathers momentum. And it's a strong desire in your mind. At that stage, to control it is very difficult. And you don't even have the intellect to begin with. So that's what happens. The vasana just comes out. It's like a flood of thoughts that take you to destruction. It's very sad. And you should see examples of it, because within you, you don't see yourself getting destroyed. So you must see others. How the process of destruction starts. When it starts, it's so innocuous. But you must be able to spot it. No, it's like the moment a person starts having a drink every day, and he says only one drink, that is danger sign. Or a person starts drinking heavily when he drinks, that's danger sign. You eat more than you should at every meal, that's 100% danger. So somewhere you got to use the intellect to control it. Next verse, 64.
रागद्वेषवियुक्तैस्तु विषयानिन्द्रियैश्चरन् आत्मवश्यैर्विधेयात्मा प्रसादमधिगच्छति.
Now when you read the previous two verses, you get disheartened. Where am I getting? I'm going to get destroyed. So quickly here he gives the formula for self-control. That's why we call it formula 64. Verse 64 of chapter 2. Don't forget, this is one of the most important verses, very practical, which you can remember. If you can remember the Sanskrit verse, it's fine. Otherwise, at least remember the concept of self-control. Because many people talk about self-control, nobody knows what self-control is. So here he says, but the self-restrained one who has gained self-mastery becomes serene, free from attraction and aversion. Such a one moves amidst the senses, controlling them. So you see, the accent is on, you don't withdraw yourself from the mind. You don't withdraw from the world. That is a cowardly thing to do. You remain in the world, you're contacting the world like anyone else, but practicing self-control. How do you practice self-control? There are two ways, because he uses two terms, self-restraint, self-mastery. Atma Vashye Vidheyatma. So the way out is, you have a desire, right? If the desire directly takes you to action without the intervention of the intellect, then you are violating self-control. Because then what happens? More desire comes back to you. It's malignant, it destroys you. So, what must you do? Just scan the desire through the intellect, pass that desire through the intellect. Let the intellect be aware, and if the intellect okays it, go ahead and enjoy without any guilt. And there is 100% enjoyment there. That is the first step. The second step is you may not have a desire for a particular thing. You may not even know of that object. And the first time you are experiencing it, you have it, you enjoy it, you like it. After that, your mind should not linger in the past enjoyment. Let's say, have you eaten rambutan? Rambutan is a fruit that is available in Southeast Asia. You get it in Thailand, Malaysia, all these places. Let's say you go to Bangkok for a conference, for work, and they serve it at breakfast. So you have it, you say, oh, I've never eaten this. You have it, you like it, it's fine. When you come back, your mind should not linger in that enjoyment, because if you do, then you create a fresh desire. This is true of anything. You may not have had Mexican food in India. You go to the United States, I eat Mexican food, you like it. You come back, you have a desire for Mexican food, you're stuck. So, as you go through life, whether you have a desire or it's a new experience, at the end of that experience, you must make sure you are clean, free from that desire. Then you're not violating self-control. But the moment either the existing desire increases, or a fresh experience creates a new desire in you, you're violating sense control. So it's like this. Sense stimuli come from the world, enter you through the 5 sense organs: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin. They are taken to the sense center in the mind. At the level, when they are taken to the mind, at that point you enjoy it. You enjoy that experience. Without participation of the mind, you don't enjoy. Post that, if you linger and say, nice rambutan. Next time I go to Thailand, I must have rambutan. Or maybe I can get my friend to bring rambutan from Bangkok. It goes on like that. Clip the thought flow. End experience with experience. Move to the next experience. Because the next experience also has some enjoyment. Now, if you're thinking of the past, the new experience you can't enjoy. Maybe you come back to India and there's a mango there is much better than rambutan. But you can't enjoy the mango because you're thinking of rambutan. You see? So actually the formula for self-control enhances your enjoyment of the world. And true enjoyment comes when you really don't have an attachment to it. You don't have a desire for it. It's pure sense contact. You enjoy it. You leave it without any hangover effect. It's a beautiful stage. So initially when you start practicing self-control, there is an element of frustration. But you compensate it with knowledge. Like, I shouldn't eat too much because I will get neutralized to it. I'll lose the joy content in it. Or I'll put on weight or whatever it is. You substitute with knowledge. Then as you go along, the mind cooperates with you. Those of you who have started practicing eating healthy food or whatever it is, controlling your eating, you will actually start enjoying. So the mind cooperates and it's much easier to control. Last stage is mind and intellect are one. There is no resistance at all from the mind. It's like sport, or you work out, or you go for a walk every day, or whatever it is, whatever, yoga every day. You start enjoying it. Then there is no resistance. So this is it. The desire should not directly propel you to activity. It should go through the intellect. That is the first step of self-control. Second step is that a new experience should not create a fresh desire. Yeah.
When you go to desire flow, your experience ends with eating it over time. How does one make sure that this same which you got a desire, this it has been scanned by the intellect, the environment remains same every day?
The last part I didn't hear.
You finish eating the food.
Yeah, and only the last part you repeat.
How do you make sure that that experience of the desire which you had just eaten remains the same, the enjoyment remains the same at every point in time?
Okay, the question is, how do you ensure that your enjoyment of a particular object remains the same every time you experience it? By practicing self-control. So you see, what happens is, when you indulge in an enjoyment indiscriminately, indiscriminate means without the participation of the intellect, then this neutralization takes place. So every successive contact is less joyful to you, gives you less joy, until you reach a stage where having it gives you no pleasure, but denial gives you pain. That is a horrible state to be in, because you alternate between no pleasure and pain. There is no joy. So what must we do? Regulate the contact. We believe that more is more. The more you indulge, the more you will enjoy. That's not true. And it is the affluent who suffer from this. So, and this happens with new affluence. Like people who have not had and it suddenly make money, they want the good things of life. They have a rich food, all that, and they indulge indiscriminately. So what you must do is, just because you can afford it, don't have it. Consciously, with the intellect, regulate your contact, which means just because you can afford to have mangoes doesn't mean you should have 3 mangoes a day. You say, let me have a mango every alternate day, or every 3 days. You can afford to have 12 mangoes a day, but you don't. You don't do things just because you can afford it. You don't eat out every day. You don't go to fancy places just because you can afford it, because you lose the enjoyment. People who can afford 5-star comfort, they don't enjoy it. You know how we know that? Because every 5-star hotel, at least in India, offers one section home food. Have you seen that? Simple potato, simple dal, plain rice. This is what they offer. And people have that, they order it. Because they're fed up with all the rich food that they get. But a person who doesn't have has value for it. And in the past, life was like that. I remember when we were kids, We didn't go out to eat that often. Hardly once in a few months we would go out, and that was such fun. It was like a celebration. Now you're eating that food every 2 days, fed up.
One should exercise restraint. Same time, the mind should enjoy the experience once.
The mind should what?
Enjoy the experience once, and at the same time, exercise restraint. So, how do these things happen? You exercise how the mind enjoy that experience once. You're supposed to actually exercise restraint and be away sex object.
See, restraint is enjoyment. That's what I'm explaining. So if you indulge indiscriminately, let's say you like it, so you have it every day, like he said, you lose the enjoyment. It is the restraint that gives you the enjoyment. When you don't have it, like suppose you say, my favorite dessert, sweet, I will eat sweets only over the weekend, not during the week. So you've denied yourself for 5 days. 6th day you thoroughly enjoy an ice cream or a rasgulla. But if you are having every day, where is the speciality? So this is the thing. The more you have, the less you enjoy. Actually, if you see, who really enjoys food, the guys on the street. I'm not joking. Have you ever seen them eat? My God, they eat with so much relish. You feel like going and saying, will you share your food with me? That relish, the affluent don't have. First of all, they don't eat properly. They're nibbling at things. So where is the enjoyment? That's the problem in life. Those who have the appetite to enjoy don't have the resources. Those who have the resources don't have the appetite. So in short, nobody enjoys. Who enjoys? Only a Vedantic. That's why I'm telling you to become Vedantins. Enjoy the world thoroughly. So what is the message for this week? Develop the intellect so that you enjoy better. Thank you. Yeah, we end with a prayer.
पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते